Greg, welcome to the studio.
Thank you, Michael.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about why are we doing this vision process?
One of the biggest reasons we're taking a look at what the vision of the National Wildlife Refuge System really is are we meeting the mission that we have set aside for 554 National Wildlife Refuges and 37 wetland management districts? And with the extent of change on the landscape that has occurred, whether you want to characterize it as climate change or environmental change or habitat degradations or however you want to look at it, are we still meeting that mission? And are we meeting that mission as best we can?
For the employees of the Fish and Wildlife Service, both in the refuge system and outside of the refuge system, what's in it for them and why is it so important that they get involved?
As far as the Fish and Wildlife Service, what better way to think about the conservation of wildlife in this country than how the refuge system helps the Fish and Wildlife Service meet its global mission? And for what better way for an employee who is perhaps, say, not in the refuge system but in another part of the organization to influence how they feel conservation can be benefited and valued through the refuge system's work.
What's the role of partnerships in the future of the refuge system and in this vision process?
Partnerships have been incredibly important to the Fish and Wildlife Service and the refuge system for as long as I've been in here. It was easy perhaps in an area where you had a scattering of lands of waterfowl production areas and easements and then private conservation work going on your neighbor's lands. But it's really spread now to other refuges that are sort of more what you would recognize as a standalone unit. But they've recognized that because of the amount of habitat change and degradation that's occurred in and around the boundaries, you just can't do it as a standalone unit. You need those partnerships to further conservation on a much more landscape level scale.
The week of July 10th, we're hosting with our partners the Conserving the Future conference. What's your vision for the Conserving the Future conference?
The week of July 10th we've set up to be very important for us to bring a sort of finality to what would be our vision piece or our vision document. But more importantly is that we would kick off the implementation strategies in the plan at that point in time. I think it's important that you not only look at your vision, but you craft the outcomes. Where are we actually going to make a difference? How are we going to make a difference? What will it take us to move these bold ideas that we've been asking for people to submit into something that becomes reality for both the refuge system and the Fish and Wildlife Service?
Well, Greg, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me in the studio. And before we leave, I was wondering if I could ask you, I kind of wanted to get to know, the real Greg Siekaniec.
I got into this field, I think, in a kind of a way that a lot of people probably do. Whether you grew up in a small town or you grew up in perhaps a farming environment. I grew up in a small town where my parents owned a lake cabin right next to a National Wildlife Refuge. I had my first exposure to, the sort of conservation ethic of a refuge from the time I was probably 8 or 9 years old. Meeting some of the actual employees of the refuge at the time, some of the old names, the Omar Swenson, very Minnesota, Norwegian type name and heritage. And realizing that, wow, you actually can have careers in a field like this, and then just becoming as passionate about the little place that I got to grow up in, and thinking that, wow, that is actually all over the country. There's places like that. They're special.